originally I started writing when I was convalescing after an operation. I was laid up for about 2 weeks reading various books and, to be honest, not really thinking very much of them. I'm afraid my other half was getting a bit fed up with me saying I could do better myself, so she said, well, go on then, do it. So I did. It took a long time for the first book to get published. I think I was sort of about 7 years before I finally did find a publisher. Had to find an agent first. Rewrote the book God knows how many times, so it'd end up being very different to where I started. And eventually it was published by a small publishing outfit that no longer exists, unfortunately, who was specialising in new books. Because the most difficult thing for any new writer is to get into print. You've got to go through the whole process of getting an agent. The agent's then got to attract the attention of a publisher. There are loads of books being published every year. Most of them disappear without trace. I pretty much had to give up writing to any sort of meaningful extent because I was getting promoted in my teaching jobs, which were taking up more and more of my time. And eventually got to the stage where I was also getting involved in a second degree, a master's, which obviously took up whatever spare time I got. And it was only once I retired that I went back to the books and thought, okay, I'd been hooked on Kindles by then. Never thought I would be, but I was. And thought, well, why not put them out in e-books just to see, give them another airing, touch them up a bit, sort them out the way I really wanted them to be. Because there were a couple of the books where I wasn't happy about the version they went out in, kind of doing an author's cut. And then it was a case of converting the text, which it was heresy at the time, but I actually took the pages out of the books, fed them through a scanner, and then worked from that. I still have a sort of vague feeling of guilt about mutilating books like that, but had to be done, I suppose. It's just a case of now hoping that the books will pick up perhaps another audience this time round, or hopefully people who did read the original ones will reread them now. At the time I was reading a lot of it, to be honest. Mostly, again, action-adventure type ones, although I also sort of read the likes of John le Carré, Len Deighton and so on. It was just something that I could work out in terms of, particularly with World War II thrillers, of the motivations of people on the other side, on each side. I mean, the World War II ones I've done, the bad guys, the Germans, that's, the enemy, very often aren't particularly bad, evil as such. They just happen to be on the other side. So you can work on the idea of having quite a likeable villain who isn't, as I said, evil, but who can also pose a very real threat to the good guys. And I find that side of it quite interesting, that you can, if you're going to do, say, a novel about, say, drugs trafficking, the bad guys have got to be evil. I mean, you can't really have a sympathetic drug baron, can you? But I sort of felt that with spy novels, you could have interesting villains. You could move away from the archetypal, Goldfinger or, the sort of megalomaniac who only wants to rule the world sort of idea. Well, I mean, there's several possibilities. Berlin Endgame is set up for a sequel because although it's the story is told and it is resolved, there are a few loose ends that could certainly be worked into a sequel. I mean, I could probably start another book about 5 minutes after the end of Berlin Endgame and just continue the story as a kind of part 2. But I've also got an idea that's been kicking around for a while, again Cormac and Woodward, that would be a bit complicated because it would actually take place before Berlin Endgame, but it's it's been worked out in a fair amount of detail, so it could be used.